So week 15 summary. 15, 14, 15. It's week 15 summary. The topic was personal testimony. So we started off just recapping kind of what we discussed the week prior with the definition of testimony. And then we talked about what a testimony is compared to a story. We wanted to really understand what testimony meant, and also understand that it's not to be forced or used all the time, things like that. So we started with some what I call discussion starters. I've been trying to have a list of these per week just to kind of get things flowing, and it just, depending on where the conversation goes, I use the rest or not, but at least it gets started. So we asked, is there a difference between testimony and a real life story? Kind of work through that, discuss that a bit. And then, in that, do we have one testimony? Is there one testimonial story, or do we have many? Discuss that. Then talked about what the goal of sharing a testimony is, which by the time we had the other discussions, some of that came out, but we wanted to state that pretty clearly, what the goal is. It's very important to know that. And had some really good discussion about that. And then we talked about, what's gained by giving one. And not to bury the lead here, it's not just the person you're testifying to that's impacted. Giving your testimony also reminds you of your story and your path, and helps you with your identity, helps you remember those things and how God carried you through the things. Oh, sorry, kind of did this out of order too. There was a homework assignment going in to Faith in Action. There was a Faith in Action item homework assignment going into this week, and it was to write down events that occurred in your life. So we started with that actually, because we needed to do the homework. So we did that. And each person basically wrote down, and there's no right or wrong answer. It was kind of interesting that we wanted more instruction and I was like, I can't instruct you on what your story is or what your events were. But effectively, we were looking at events in our life that maybe could impact someone else, impacted us, but could also impact someone else, something they've gone through, something we could share, a struggle. It could be a good or bad. There was no, just events, things that, happen in your life. And then, we talked about you can tell that story, but if Christ was in that, carried you through it, that's how it becomes a testimony, because testimonies are Christ-centered. They're the truth. So we went through all that stuff. We discussed why we were even talking about testimony. And we're supposed to be prepared to use it. When asked, we're supposed to be able to give a response. But it's not an easy thing to do. So we had some of that discussion, and it was really good. Shared methods that didn't work, Giving a testimony is not necessarily just quoting scripture to somebody. So, some people shared some different interactions they had with people and what turned them off, what worked, and just, it was a very open discussion. And I'm not going to go into obviously some of the stuff that was talked about, but it was good, really good discussion about that. And then we went into, okay, what are some keys of a personal testimony? And when I asked that question, and we were kind of struggling to figure out what that would be, like what makes it up and why. And that's understandable. That's not an easy question. So it's open-ended. And I said, okay, well, let's go to the scripture then. So we went and looked at Acts 26, and I had everybody read. Everybody read Acts 26, the entire chapter. And Acts 26, then we talked about it after the reading was done. And everybody read to themselves. We didn't read aloud. I wanted everybody to be in their Bible reading, or their app, whatever. So after that, kind of broke it all down. And, Paul's testimony in Acts 26 was to King Agrippa, and first thing I asked is, well, how did it come to be? And, well, you read Acts 26, and then you ask yourself that question. How did it come to be? All right, and then we spoke about, the different sections of it and what was important about each part of chapter 26. And again, if you haven't read it already, as you read it, think about that. Well, what are the different? Are there different chunks of time explained? Like, what was the focus of these? Because you're going to end up with three. You should end up with three different things that will help line it out. All right, so Acts chapter 26 should take less than 5 minutes. I'm a slow reader. It probably took me 6, 7. I don't know. Doesn't matter. The point is, his testimony is not 30 pages. Okay. Short and concise. All right. I know some of you didn't read it. I'm going to give you the answers anyway. It's fine. So, and the reason I'm going to do that is because this is an important thing, and it's kind of hard to navigate through it. Like we struggled in the group. It's just trying to make it simple. So, I'm joking when I say that. It'll just help if you read it to understand what we're going through. All right, so there is a before. So first, Paul gets an audience with King Agrippa. The king gives Paul the floor to talk about it. That's important. Paul wasn't preaching to him. Paul was just telling his story. He was testifying to what had happened because he was given the opportunity. Key point number 1. Then as Paul starts explaining it, what does he first start with? He starts with his life before there was a change. So before he was doing those things, persecuting Jews, and he went into some of those details. And then he explained how he came to know Christ. And for Paul, that was a pretty abrupt, no questions asked encounter. Remember, people then didn't have the Holy Spirit in them like we do now. So it was a very different encounter. But it was still how Paul came to know Christ. And then there was an after. After he came to know Christ, what did he do next? And Paul's transformation is remarkable. He went from persecuting the Jews to becoming part of the way. He came from, going after these guys to being a part of their group and preaching. He went from killing people to showing peace. Major transformation for Paul. Here's the thing. This is one person and one person's testimony, and his was very different than probably yours, mine, I would say. Most of us, probably. We're not going to have Jesus come and say, why are you persecuting me? Turn around. Stop it. Oversimplification. Anyway. And the point of reading it, and I want to make that crystal clear, the point of reading that was not to say, oh, look what Paul did, and look how he had such an important story, and his story was this, and it was very dramatic, and he went from this to this, and I didn't. No. It's not the point. The point of it was to see the formula for a testimony. Because really, if you're asked to be ready to answer, I think that's Peter 3:15. When you're asked, you have to be ready to give an answer. Paul was asked. Floor was given. He responded. And he responded with, this is who I was. First thing, this is who I was. Then this is how I got to know Christ, or how I came to know Christ. and this is me after. Every Christian has that story. You have that formula. You have a before, you have a how you came to know, and you have an after. And the after should be different than the before. And the how is going to be different based on your path. But we all have that. The path is there. The path is different for everybody, but the formula is the same. Talk about before, how, and then what resulted after. Before, how, after. So we got into tips for writing a testimony. It was interesting because we had some people in there that were starting to write the testimony, and I wanted to go through some tips, which is fine. Just wanted to put some, not guardrails up, but have a guide. So tips to writing your testimony. First, you have to believe your testimony needs to be shared. Guess what? It does. This is for every Christian. Your testimony needs to be shared. It's part of the call that we have to spread the word in this kingdom. There's nobody that isn't called to provide a witness or testimony. Not one. Jesus doesn't say, well, just the pastors do this, or just the other person do that. Paul didn't say that. Just you have to be this person. Nope. And oh, by the way, they're all going to be different for a reason. We'll talk about that. So, one, your testimony needs to be shared. You got to believe that. Two, pray before you prepare a testimony. So this is, again, you're going to write a testimony. Now, you're doing this to go through the process and to prepare yourself and to get better with your story so that you can be real, which is the next one. Be real. I know, crazy, right? Make it personal, authentic, and Christ-centered. Personal, authentic, Christ-centered. Be concise and have a theme. So I said when we started, the homework going into the week was to write down some events that have occurred in your life. Those are different themes. Maybe it's a divorce or maybe it's something else. I mentioned them. I gave them some examples because they were struggling with that a bit. But just, once that happened, then there were people that had a whole list. But those are different themes. Oh, by the way, I think if I forgot to mention this earlier, the question with, do you have one or many? You have many. Because your experiences in different ways allow you to connect with others if you're sharing and connecting. So you have one testimony on how you came to Christ overall, but that's not your only testimony. It doesn't just have to be that, and that's part of what we talked about, where we have this, we've been taught that that's what a testimony is, and that is a testimony. But you can talk to somebody for 60 seconds about something they're going through that maybe you went through, and you can bring God into it, Christ into that, and that's a testimony too. It's not a specific way, and everybody's got different opportunities, different experiences, and a different way of doing it. Don't get stuck in a rut. Don't think it's got to be a certain way. It doesn't. But it is important to have a theme. If you're talking to somebody and they bring up divorce and you've been divorced, that's you should have kind of your story. And it's not a memorization thing. It's more of just get yourself comfortable with sharing that. Be ready to connect and then to explain how Christ came into your life and what he did. Testimony is truth and can be proven. Don't embellish. Don't make up things that didn't happen. State the facts. Keep it simple. Way more impactful. The one thing I said too about the concise thing is the more you want people to listen, the less you'll say. I say that as I'm talking to a camera. I can't really listen to the camera, so I guess it's okay. Practice. Give it to others. work through it with somebody else that knows maybe a little bit about your story, or maybe doesn't. Here's the crazy thing. I didn't get to practice last night. Here's why. And I was prepared with videos to show what different testimonies were, and different stories, and go through that. I didn't show any of them. Because after we talked about the tips, people wrote down theirs and then just started sharing them. Which I gotta be honest, wasn't what I expected. Which was great. So, oh, by the way, one of the people that shared, the first one that shared his testimony 3 or 4 weeks prior, said he didn't have a story to tell. Well, he didn't have a crazy story to tell. Like wasn't doing drugs and then flipped out. And then we talked about that too, by the way. And how every story matters to somebody, and it does. And a number of people there grew up in the church, but a number of the people there weren't saved initially or in the early days. Some were, but some were not. Didn't realize stuff until later. There were common threads. As we talked about it, I was like, oh yeah, I didn't know that. And I knew for many, many years, and I looked at him and said, I've never heard that part of your story. And he's like, yeah, I really haven't shared it. But it was good. Like it connects with people. It's a, and I used my kids as an example. They've both been baptized. But they're both teenagers. Do I have to say anything else? No, sorry. But they're questioning things, and I think that's good. I that was my path. Like, I can question now. I don't want them to be I was way beyond just questioning. But they're questioning things, and you have to. Blind faith isn't faith at all. You have to learn. You have to know the truth. In whatever way you get there, the truth is the truth, but paths are different for everybody. So as people mention that, it's like, yeah, that would connect with so-and-so, or that would connect with so-and-so. So it was kind of showing, hey, that's an important thing to say. Do you have to be up in front of the church and say it? Nope. You could talk to somebody for 60 seconds and get enough out that they know. Here's the thing. Like we talked about there, live the testimony so that somebody asks you why you're different. Well, how did you get through that? What about this? Live it, then tell them why. Scripturally sound. So in closing, basically, it's, we had good discussion on personal testimony. We talked about some tips, tricks to do it, a formula. I'll put that stuff up here. To help you maybe work through yours. Hopefully you will. Everybody has one, and they might help you. These tips might help you do that. Please do. This week, the faith and action items are, and that was the thing. We asked faith and action, and somebody's like, share your testimony. I'm like, not necessarily, because if your goal is to share your testimony, then you're probably forcing it. Prepare your testimony is more what I wanted us to do this week. So, of the themes of the different things that they wrote down, events in their life, write out a testimony for at least 2 other ones. Of course, they didn't like that. That's homework, and I get it. I don't like it either. Full disclosure. But the more you do that, the more you understand. The more you understand yourself. It's part of your identity, and the better you'll be to share it. You'll be ready. And here's the thing. I told them some stuff last night. I picked one of my themes, and I told them some things there, and it was interesting because one of the other people said, well, what was it after? I forgot to explain the after, which is one of the 3 things. And I'm explaining to them how to go do this. I need to practice, is my point. So that's why you go through it. You do it with somebody, and then somebody asked me a question, and went, what about the after? And I went, man, okay, I got to remember to do that. So it does take practice. You have to do it, in the mirror to yourself, whatever the case may be. Write it down and keep writing until you get it. And it's not to memorize it. It's to be comfortable with it and to be prepared. And I'm not. I mean, I've shared stories, but it is not, one of the reasons it's not easy is because it's not, you really struggle to come up with words because you haven't practiced. It's like anything else. So practice. And then when you get the opportunity, apply it. Thanks for watching.